Now we'll move on to our keynotes by eminent industry leaders. For our first keynote, may I request upon Mr. Riyaz Tambe, Director System Engineering, Palo Alto Networks, to share his views on the topic Security Operating Platform, Redefining Security Consumption. Mr. Riyaz.
Morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me. Not sure if it's working. All right, thank you. Morning, everyone. What I'm going to talk about today is, again, platform. I mean, the whole topic that we are discussing here, or the theme that we have here is platform. You know, before I delve into my presentation, what's a platform? By simple definition, platform is something which is extensible. What do you mean by extensible? Extensible means it can be extended anywhere. That's the whole definition of platform, right? So why do we need to look at a platform? Why do we need something like a platform in the first place? It's because, first of all, we are living in a digital age. We are living in a digital age. We all believe this? We do? Yes, we are living in digital, whether we like it or not. We are connected. Mobile devices, computers, we're talking about IoT now, everything is going to be connected. And for this digital age, for us to go further in this digital age, the most important thing that needs to happen is we need to maintain trust. Sorry, I'm just a clicker, probably. The most important thing is trust. If we do not trust what is being implemented, if we do not trust, it's a very simple thing. If I have to do mobile banking today, and if I don't trust that whatever that bank has not made its system secure, I would never do a transaction. As simple as that, right? So in this world, nobody would trust the digital age if we as a community don't take care of security. And what is the biggest challenge that we have right now? Right? The challenge is, if we don't make it secure, people will not use it. Why? Because what does technology do? Technology helps us to become more productive. If you look from a business side of things, if you look from an enterprise side of things, technology is supposed to help us be more productive. That's the reason why we adopt technology. From a consumer perspective, right, we are so hooked on today. Imagine a day in your life if you don't have your WhatsApp on. Can you imagine? It becomes very difficult, right? So overall, if you don't trust this technology piece which is driving us into the digital age, or we are already in the digital age, it becomes a problem. We are talking about a time where people will lose productivity. And things are getting complex, by the way. Whether we like it or not, we are seeing different types of threats on a regular basis. Almost on a daily basis, you'd think. I mean, if you follow security on a daily basis, you will come to know of new things happening. Things are getting more complex. I was in a couple of meetings just 2 days back, where I said, in the recent RSA 2018 conference, there were 600 new startups. 600 new startups which showcase their technology at RSA. What does this tell us? It tells us that, first of all, there's a lot of complexity in there. That is the reason why we got 600 new ideas. Now, I'm not saying that 600, all of them will become successful, but the point is there are 600 new ideas there. That's the whole idea, right? The problem is it's getting more complex. So we need to look at new things. We need to keep up with the pace that we're seeing in the industry. Why? Because we see new trends. Cloud. Now, not that cloud is new, or not that cloud is something out of the box right now. It is something that everybody knows. Everybody's made a decision, maybe a larger or a smaller decision, but that strategy is already there. We already have a strategy in place where people are moving workloads, enterprises are moving workloads to the cloud. And I always ask this question, and when I generally go and meet customers, I say this. You know, when you defined your data center, when you designed your data center, right, you took care of security in a specific manner. We call it the legacy approach now, right? We define traditional data centers having multiple different appliances or solutions or whatever you call it, right? But when the same workload is now moving into the cloud, how are we taking care of security? Are we taking care of compliance? Are we taking care of how do we monitor our workloads? Are we taking care of what's happening to my data sitting in the cloud environment? How do I secure it, right? But because ultimately it's a shared model, right? Security is there. I'm not saying cloud providers do not provide security. They do. But is that good enough for us? Slowly, things are moving into IoT. Now, that's scary. That's scary. Why? Because if, for example, if tomorrow I can control my home on my mobile device, there is always this risk of somebody accessing or hacking into it and taking control of things. It's a very, very risky scenario. It's good, it's productive, that's the way to go. Not that the industry is not going to do it, people will do it, but then at the same side, there is risk. Right? That's the whole idea. So we can't stop these things. So to make sure that we can live up to this, it is important that we have a different approach. We cannot just simply go by a traditional approach. And that is where I think the important thing to focus on is the platform part. We need to look at a platform which is extensible. Extensible to make sure that we, first of all, get a consistent security experience, irrespective of where my data resides, irrespective of where my workforce is. That's the main thing. We need to have that approach, especially in a world today where we all know, we all realize that the cost of computing is coming down. We all agree? Yes, cost of computing is coming down. Now, if you think, what does this imply? It implies that our adversaries, the bad guys, the cyber criminals, do not need to invest a lot of money to initiate an attack. Right? And by the way, we are not dealing with humans anymore. Sorry. We are not dealing with humans anymore. Our adversaries, the cyber criminals, are highly, highly, highly automated. Which means today, if we plan to respond to an automated attack by having certain humans who have the right skill to protect us, we probably have the wrong strategy. Right? An automated system. In a very recent, I actually forgot the name of the conference. I think it was DEF CON in the US or some conference where, they have these, humans go against humans. Like a cyber range thing. You go against humans, you compete, you show your skills and all those things. For the first time in 2018, it was humans against machines. It was humans against machines in a cyber war. Humans won this in 2018. Humans were able to defeat machines, but machines came this close. Machines came this close to beating humans. And the learning out of that session was, it's a matter of time when machines will take over. When machines will take over everything. So humans will not be able to cope up with it. Why? Because that's how systems have become smart. Because that's the amount of compute that is available today. That's the amount of processing that it can do. So to live up to this, it is very important, right, that we also innovate. The bad guys are innovating at a much faster pace. I'll give you some examples. There was a research done by Ponemon Institute which said they see 35% rise in fileless attacks. You all understand fileless attacks? So why did this happen, first of all? We all talk about APT as a solution, and I still hear customers talking about APT. And APT many times is nothing but APT equals to sandboxing. That's what people talk about generally. And I personally believe sandboxing is nothing but a commodity. Sandboxing as a technique, as a technology, is one of those things which should be part of your overall cybersecurity architecture. It's not the solution. It's not the solution for everything. Now what happened was, what does sandbox do? Sandbox generally what does is takes files, puts it into a sandbox, looks at its behavior. Based on its behavior, we'll say whether this file is good or bad, and then we'll take a decision whether you have to block it or you have to allow it. That's what a sandbox basically does. And why did sandboxes evolve is because we saw attacks where genuine looking files, things like MS Office files, PDF files, these files were weaponized. These files were weaponized, and that's the reason why sandboxing as a technique came in, so that we can identify what is right and what is wrong. Right? The bad guys saw it. The adversary saw it and said that, okay, fine, if the industry is moving towards sandboxing as a technique, we need to innovate. They innovated, and that's where fileless attacks started. We see more fileless attacks now than what we saw last year. Why? Because they're innovating. So we also need to cope up with that same innovation. If we don't cope up, we're going to lose this battle. That's the whole idea. And by the way, right, I represent Palo Alto Networks, but I make this statement on the stage. There is not one company, there is not going to be one vendor which will solve all your security problems. Not possible. It's absolutely impossible. I will challenge anyone who comes on the stage and says, you know what, my company or my vendor or this OEM or that OEM can solve all your problems. It's impossible. It's impossible. You can't live up to it. Right? So the only way to do it is make sure that we create something by which we can actually consume security at the click of a button. And why do I say so? I say that is because, let's again look at this example of sandboxing. When sandboxing as a technique came in, on an average, enterprises spent approximately 6 months evaluating the technology. First of all, identifying the who are the right vendors, and then finally doing an evaluation, and then taking a decision, and then deploying it. It's probably a 6 to 9 month cycle. We all agree? Easy, right? 6 to 9 months to deploy one technique, one technology. 6 to 9 months. So in 9 months, imagine where the adversaries have gone. They have innovated, they've gone much ahead. We see new types of threats, we see new techniques coming up, and we are still evaluating only one technology. What needs to happen is we need to look at techniques which can be consumed by the click of a button. Why? Because there are too many moving parts. I cannot just simply think, oh, I have a sandbox now. By the time you deploy the sandbox, there are 10 new types of threats which come in, and by the way, there are 10 new techniques already available, which probably is used to bypass or evade a sandbox. Too many parts available, too many moving parts. So important way is to make sure that you have a platform which can consume. We need to look at a new consumption model. Why do I say so? Consumption where I don't have to wait to evaluate a new technology. I don't have to go to that traditional model where let me identify who the vendors are, let me identify how what works better, let me analyze, get into something where I involve a third-party consultant, let me see what the consultant says and then take a decision. That's a very long cycle. A platform is something where you can consume things at the click of a button. If I need to protect myself against a specific type of threat, and if there is a solution available, I should be able to consume it in real time. That's the way it should be. And that's what we are working towards. First philosophy, we know as a company we cannot solve all your problems. But we know one thing, if we can create that platform, we can actually work with the industry to make sure we can consume security at a much faster pace. That's what we're doing. So a new model is required. When I talk about a platform, when I talk about a new approach, it's a new model that is required. First, there is a lot of innovation. Innovation that is happening at Palo Alto Networks. There is innovation that is happening outside of Palo Alto Networks. There's a lot of innovation happening everywhere. Plus the innovation happening at the adversary level. They are also innovating at a much faster pace. So we need to first of all make sure that we innovate faster. There needs to be more sharing of information. We all know the power of sharing, right? And I'm sure everybody's gone through multiple examples. There have been multiple examples where we say, you know what, I saw a threat in Mexico. In the next 5 minutes, you will see the same information here in India. So you're already protected. We all know this story. This has been happening, information sharing. But the information sharing should not be limited to that specific vendor. Why shouldn't it happen that if, for example, cert-in gives me certain information, how can I automate it? We need more automation. If I have specific information about a specific type of threat, I need to make sure that I have a mechanism in place where I can consume that information in an automated manner. We need to make it automated. If it's not automated, if it's human beings involved, right, it might take its own sweet time. And history says every attack that happened, every attack that has been publicized, information was there. It was just that people took X amount of time to implement it, or probably in the whole barrage of information or the overflow of information. When I say overflow of information, what I mean is logs. They probably lost out the most critical pieces of information. So we need to have an automated system which can identify, first of all, what is the right piece of information, how do I automate it. We need to have more services. Security is not about adding more hardware to your infrastructure. It's not going to solve your problem. Again, I make this statement. I represent Palo Alto Networks here, but I'm making the statement. More hardware is not going to solve your problem. You need more security services. You need more intelligence. You need more software. That's what is the way to go, right? That should be easy to deploy. If it takes you 6 months just to deploy, and I know there are some organizations which are fine, it's like confined into one area, but there are organizations which are like very diverse, massive scale. How do you then make sure that my deployment is very easy, right? And it should be flexible enough. Flexible, why? Because if I today decide that if I want to move my workload from here to the cloud, or then I want to have a model where I am not stuck onto only one cloud. I might use any cloud. I can use AWS, I can use Azure, I can use Google Cloud, whatever comes up tomorrow. I should have the flexibility. That's where the new model comes in. That's where the new platform comes in, right? And that's what we at Palo Alto Networks have done. We have evolved our solution into the exact model where we say we should be able to innovate faster. We should be able to make sure that we are sharing information not only with our customers, but also sharing information with our ecosystem partners, or you can say competitors. We are the only company who actually share information even with our competitors. We do that, right? So we've made things where we can actually deploy things at a much faster pace. Deploy things at the click of a button. That's the model that we are after. That's the vision that we are on, right? So what we started, again, I'll go through this, how have we changed this evolution, right? What has Palo Alto Networks done to make sure that we are on this journey where we can actually consume things at a much faster pace? We all started with this. And most of us who actually know Palo Alto Networks, they know us as a Palo Alto Networks as a next generation firewall company, right? Most of it. Most of the people when I talk to, Palo Alto Networks, next generation firewall. But it's not just a next generation firewall. Yes, we started with next generation firewalls. And the whole idea was we added more services to it. Firewalls, IPSs, APD solutions, VPNs, all those different things that we added very early on. But that was phase one. That was very early on. That was 12 years back when we started as a company. Then we evolved. We evolved into a model where we said sharing of information. So sharing of information is not something that we're doing today. We started doing this 10 years back. We thought information sharing is very, very important. And what is information sharing? We call them, in a more technical term, IOCs. We identify threats, we identify indicators of compromise, and we share it. Right? That's the whole idea. We've been doing this for 10 years now. We've been doing this for 10 years, nothing new. Right? And then, sorry, this clicker is taking some time. Yeah, probably just moved ahead. But then we identified that things are evolving. We see new types of threats. And why do I say so? So we evolved into the endpoint space, right? We started with endpoint. And why is it important to look at endpoint again, right? And I'll give a very basic example. We all know WannaCry. Very old. I'm sure people have read a lot about it already, right? There have been theses around it. There have been a lot of detailing into how WannaCry happened, what happened, this, that, right? There are many things. I've heard so many different things about it. But just to keep it very simple. Why did WannaCry happen? It happened because somebody identified a vulnerability in a protocol. So I will make the statement. Successful malware delivery is the result of a successful exploit. You all agree? WannaCry happened because somebody used something called as double pulsar, or eternal blue. Double pulsar was the malware, eternal blue was the technique which was used, the exploit rather, to exploit SMB as a protocol, because of which WannaCry happened. Malware delivery is the result of a successful exploit. How many of us actually look at exploits on the endpoint? That's what we do with our endpoint story. Traps, our solution, that's what we do. Look at exploits, not just malware. Because malwares you'll keep on seeing on millions of malwares on a daily basis. And malware is, again, I call it commodity now. How you get in, what's the exploit is what we need to see. And then we see cloud. Many times when we design our security architectures, we don't focus on how do I make sure that I have the same consistent security even in my cloud architecture. I have our firewall, IPS, URL filtering, whatever in my data center. But let me only look at traditional layer 3 policies in my cloud. Why? Because my cloud provider says you're secure. That's a shared model. Cloud providers will take care of that infrastructure. Your data is your responsibility. Your data is your responsibility. So we identified that very early on. And even in SaaS, we use Salesforce. The biggest example of SaaS is Office 365. Most of us use it. Whether we like it or not, most of us use it. Right? So point is, we moved on. We said, okay, fine, information needs to be shared in a way that can be shared across the platform. Not just at the network. Network could be on-premise, cloud, SaaS. It also needs to go to your endpoint. That's how information should be shared. But then, information should not be limited to what Palo Alto Networks gives you. Sharing of information, again, I'm so sorry because this is taking a bit of time, my clicker. I'll just go through my slides so that we can all see it. Yeah, sorry. We said, why not look at a model where, and we know one thing, and I'll go back to the same thing, we alone cannot solve all your problems. There are so many different types of solutions already available. So we created something called as an application framework. And I'll give an analogy to it. We all use smartphones, Apple or Google, either Apple or Android devices, right? What makes it smart? What makes it smart? The device in itself is not smart. It's the apps that you use that make it smart. It's the applications that you use on that phone make it smart, right? Why? Because you can consume it. What we did was we created the world's first security application store, security app store. It's called the application framework, where the idea is it's not just apps coming from Palo Alto Networks. You will see apps coming from multiple different vendors, which you can then consume at the click of a button. And we've already started this journey. We've already launched in, at our Ignite conference, which is our annual conference that happens in the US. It's also happening in Amsterdam in October, where these are the first 30 partners that we are working with, where they will come up with their applications, which you can use and consume it from our app store. Obviously, we can get into more detail as to how it works, what is required, how to make it happen, all that thing. But the point is, we are working with ecosystem partners because we realize if we have to, two things. One is if I have to bring down my consumption time, the amount of time that I use to deploy technology, right? Why I don't need to go through, I need to click on a button and that I need to consume that, first. Second, how do I cope up with the pace of innovation? That can only happen when we allow things to happen. It's basically nothing but an API exchange framework that we've created where multiple vendors can come and write their apps. Even you can write. Indian companies like Wipro already has an app there, right? And it's publicly announced. And you can consume it. This is all security applications that you can consume. That's the model that we are after, right? We cannot look at the same traditional model. That's not the way to go. What we feel is this is the way you can consume security at a much faster pace. This is the way you will be able to cope up with innovation, and that's the only way to automate it. You click, the information comes to you, it gets enforced, at the click of a button you can consume security. That's the whole model. No point in looking at a traditional architecture or traditional way of consuming security. That's the way we are thinking. That's the journey on which Palo Alto Networks is. And that's where we have to change now. Because as we speak, there probably is a new threat that we see in the wild today, which is already creating havoc in the industry. Thank you. I hope this was useful. Great.
And now next we have Mr. Purshottam Purswani, VP and CTO, Atos India Private Limited, and he would share his thoughts on the topic token economy.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me well? Yeah, my name is Purshottam. I'm part of Atos India. I drive innovation within Atos India. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about business platform economy. Of course, I see a lot of colleagues talking about security platforms, and was a very interesting session which was done prior to this, where how platforms are leveraged for providing a security ecosystem. Okay. Now, if we see in a digital age, the most successful companies are the ones who have leveraged data and platforms. Okay. So, likes of Amazon, likes of Airbnb or Uber, or we talk about Uberization of platforms, basically. Okay. Now, what do we see in that? As we see that we are in a very hyper-connected world. Now, with this hyper-connected world, this generates a lot of data. And eventually, what is happening is, first time we see a movement where design, performance, feedback, and the usage, all this information is available on a platform. And we already are seeing a lot of innovations being delivered using this data available. Okay, so from a supply chain perspective, from design to the usage, all these services or these innovations which are happening are actually driving a new economy age. Okay, now why platforms? Okay, so I mean, platforms are basically a driver for business value growth. Now, if you look at traditional supply chain or value chain, the rules which this platform govern are totally different. Okay. Now, what we're seeing is it's a total paradigm shift. Okay, from a traditional value chain to a value-based or network-based economy. Okay. Now, eventually, what is happening is any platform then have to look at which are the kind of it's kind of a jigsaw puzzle where you look at each of these data points or each of these partners or vendors whom you want to collaborate or you want to get into a network and eventually provide a value-added services. Okay, so that is where if you look at number one, it is more and more our consumers are connected, more and more data is available. Now, eventually, how do you leverage this data for your benefit? Okay, now the second aspect is, in the past, it was me, myself, I alone, okay, driving everything. Now it is no more the case, which we saw in the previous presentation as well. Now what we see is we have to really collaborate with a lot of vendors, with a lot of partners, okay, and eventually offer my products as a service. So we are moving from product-based approach to a service-based approach, okay. Now that is where I would say you platformize or die. Now when you do a platformize, of course, there are different ways and means of doing it. Either you do it centralized, where you have some kind of an orchestrator, like for example, Amazon or Uber being an orchestrator here, or it could be a decentralized, which I'll be talking about in the later slides. So eventually what we're doing is, we are basically meeting the market expectations and eventually generating a lot of additional business. Now typically when we talk about platforms, of course, was quite interesting to see. In security also, it is getting into a lot of, to an advanced maturity stage. But we kind of analyze in terms of, I mean, is it only in B2C world where these platforms are existing? The answer is no. Eventually, if you look at any kind of verticals as we speak, there is some kind of platform ecosystem already available. Okay, as crude as precision agriculture. For example, John Deere coming up with a concept of connected tractors, leveraging big data, IoT analytics, and eventually helping the farmers to identify which is the area they should work on. Okay, eventually what they did, they kind of built a platform which they could leverage. Or if you look at, for example, healthcare, Doximity, for example, it's a LinkedIn kind of a network of doctors. Or if you look at education, now it is no more a traditional school-based education, but it's getting into an MOCC kind of, so for instance, Udacity and all, where they are bringing professors and students on a single platform and eventually helping industry to get trained on the new disruptive digital technologies. Or if you look at industrial sectors, okay, which are typically traditional, it takes a while for them to adapt to the new technology. Even we are seeing a lot of friction or a lot of development happening towards it. For example, Siemens launching their MindSphere IIoT platform, okay, where eventually the data coming from turbines or different kind of motors, this data would be available for different vendors to use it for generating a new kind of a product or service offering. Okay, so I would say platforms have really moved further. We are seeing it in all kind of verticals. Okay, now we in Atos, of course, we work a lot into B2C segments. Okay, and I would say from a B2C segments, we are already seeing the platforms actually getting mature enough. Okay, now, but moreover, what we are also seeing is B2C segment has already leveraged economy of data, but now in B2B segments also, there are a lot of discussions or a lot of manufacturers sharing their data with different partners and vendors, okay, eventually creating a new services, okay. So for example, let's take a case of if I want to see a new airplane being designed. So in the sense, what we could do is, or what is being done is, for example, Airbus sharing their design data, airports sharing their operational data, airlines sharing their consumer data. Now imagine the amount of services or new kind of innovation offering which you could offer. And that is where we say B2B segments are building a lot of industrial data platforms, okay, eventually creating a new kind of value-added services onto the market. Okay. Now, at the same time, we also looked at in terms of what is the innovation or what is the new things which are happening when it comes to the platform. Okay, so what we said is data, connectivity, and partnership eventually are coming together and creating a new business models. Okay, so there is a lot of innovations happening in business models. I mean, it's quite impressive to see how services are leveraged on this type of platform. Okay, eventually we see blockchain being used as a technology, disruptive technology, basically to develop or to set up a trust between these partners and vendors. Third thing, of course, it was a burst in the past, token economy, okay, where cryptocurrencies, how could they become a fuel for the network? And last not the least, artificial intelligence, where we'll talk about in terms of how artificial intelligence is helping to do things matchmaking. Okay. So to begin with, new business model. So as I said, B2C is more or less established. Of course, there are a lot of new innovation, new business models happening in terms of B2C. But in case of B2B, what we are seeing is products which were traditional products, now they are moving into services. You can lease a turbine, for instance, or you can take the data generated of turbine and generate a new product itself. So we are getting into a data monetization model or a capacity-led model, okay, or a subscription model. So there's a lot of innovation happening around how a product which was traditionally offered as a CAPEX is getting more into an OPEX. So I would say there's a lot of learning which we took from B2C and applied it on B2B. Okay. The next kind of disruption or next kind of technology disruption which is being adopted, as I said, is blockchain. Now, if you look at Amazon, you look at Uber, I mean, they are orchestrator, right? They're kind of a middleman in between, which are connecting both this kind of an ecosystem of data producer, data consumers. But we are also working on a lot of decentralized approach, okay, where you don't need a orchestrator in between, but a network effort, I mean, a group of people setting up a network and setting up a trust between all this and eventually offering a service, okay. So that is where distributed ledgers, blockchain are being used. For example, we are working on one case which is procure to pay, okay, which is an enterprise use case from procurement to payment to the vendor, okay. Now that is where we were trying to see how we could use a distributed ledger kind of technology to eventually help reduce or bring in the operational efficiency. And as I said, token economy now. So token economy is, I would say, I mean, it had really catched up a big time when cryptocurrency was at the top. Okay, so eventually Bitcoin, Ethereum, and things like that, where the prices were quite high. So eventually, the idea is, I mean, there is one guy who's in US. There are a few guys in Asia Pac, in Europe. Now, these people don't know each other. How do I set up a trust? And that is where token economy really took off. So eventually, it is kind of incentivizing the actors who are on the network. Okay, so eventually, whatever work you do on a platform, the value of the platform increases. As the value of the platform increases, the currency value, which is a virtual currency value, increases. So eventually, it's a kind of a network effect which comes into the place. Okay, now, when it comes to token economy, there could be different ways this token economy could be used. Okay, one thing which we see is kind of an ICO, which is an initial token offering, where the idea is you have a fantastic idea with you, and how do you basically finance that idea? So eventually you launch an ICO, where the idea is you invest in Ether or Bitcoin or Ripple, for instance, on the virtual currency, and eventually own an assets. Okay, so that is one way. Second way is, as and when you use services of this platform, you kind of pay a fee in terms of tokens. So that is a usage-based kind of token. And of course, similarly, the way we have hardware assets, there could be software assets as well, or what we call as digital assets. Okay, so there are different ways in which the platform provider are leveraging this token economy. And last not the least, we have huge amount of data. That's what I said in the beginning of my presentation. So how do you kind of make this matchmaking? Okay, so eventually we are working with a couple of our customers, where the idea is we look at different kind of data sources, and what we look at is whether this data source has any play in improving or taking my platform to the next level. Okay, so taking an example of payments. So we're working with a lot of these fintechs and these companies, where eventually we're looking at, is there a data source or is there kind of an API which is available, which I could leverage and improve my platform, or I improve the value of my platform. Okay. So after working, I would say it's a journey for a couple of years, and we said, okay, is it a real simple thing to develop a platform, or what kind of ecosystems do I have to build a platform? Okay, so I would say there are multiple stakeholders in building a platform. So it starts with data producers, eventually digital age, generating a lot of data, so that you have a lot of producers, you have a lot of consumers, so consumers in terms of you exposing some services and an API, and there would be some company who's building on top of these applications. So you have data consumers, and of course you have community of people which will fuel a lot of new ideas, and eventually you will offer this platform as a marketplace. Eventually you would like the third-party companies or enterprises to build on the top of platform this application. So you have marketplaces, you have a lot of developers, where a lot of these companies are doing a lot of hackathons. Eventually what they want to promote their platform. As I speak now, for example, Microsoft has launched a hackathon on how they could use Azure functions. That's a new launch which they did. Eventually, so there's a lot of things which are being done for developer community as well. Okay, and orchestrator is someone who really says, okay, who kind of govern this platform. Now, as I said, orchestrator we had needed in past, but eventually we are also looking at a kind of a decentralized kind of a platform, where do you really need an orchestrator for this? And most important actor in all this platform is a regulator, okay, where eventually you are kind of sharing the data, and whether you are allowed from a data privacy perspective or from a GDPR perspective. So is it really simple to kind of develop a platform? Not really. There are a lot of challenges we see, and this is based on our experience, where eventually you get into a lot of issues around regulations, around governance, around trust, okay, around what should be your pricing model. I mean, it's a network effect. So the pricing model should be such a way that it should be attractive, and I should get a lot of new players into this platform. So pricing model, for instance. And of course, as in when we work on this, there are ways to navigate through these challenges. Okay, so for a couple of customers, we looked at what is the value this platform bring into the place. Is there a play where I could kind of price it as per the value which it provides? We kind of build a lot of partner ecosystem, where we made a journey seamless for new partners who want to onboard onto this. Okay, so that is where you do a lot of innovation stuff around that. And of course, we look at, is there a way I could self-regulate it? Okay, of course, when I'm using a personal data, I would take a required consent, and I would do required data masking and things like that. Okay, and I could self-regulate it. So these are some of the best ways we could navigate through those challenges. Okay. Now, with this, I want to end my presentation, of course, with this one last slide, where I mean, everyone has a brilliant idea. I mean, if you go onto the internet and you search on the ideas which the startups have for the platform, but I mean, they sometimes get disappointed or they get into a challenge. So that is where we kind of tell them to approach, to make use of this big, hairy, audacious goal approach, okay? Where from externally it looks very ambitious, it looks very impossible, but internally somewhere you feel that you can do it, okay? And for that, eventually we kind of have an approach which we have designed. So basically you start with what is a vision and ambition of a platform, okay? I talked about different actors which are available on the platform. So how do you onboard them? How do you connect with them? How do you basically ensure that these partners are constantly engaged with you, okay? You also, at the same time when you're doing this, you also should look at, do you have the required skills available for doing this, okay? So from a vision perspective, you look really great. But from an execution perspective, if things do not work for you, then it becomes just a vision statement, okay? So that is where you look at all the talent and you look at, is there a way I could kind of onboard this talent internally or externally, okay? Most important aspect is we are playing with data, okay? So that is where data and technical elements really help. Whether it's a real-time data, whether it is a kind of a data where I could do some kind of an analysis or some kind of profiling of a customer. So data and technical elements also play an important role. Accelerating open innovation. Now, as I said, a lot of platform provider at this moment of time, whenever they launch a new platform in a couple of months, they have this kind of a hackathons or what we call strategy hackathons, where eventually they take ideas from the people who are external to that company. Okay, so that is where it is most important that you kind of accelerate this open innovation. And of course, most important is you have a platform. Now, how do you kind of monetize it or how you kind of sell it to your consumers? So that is where your business models play a key role. Okay, so these are some of the aspects which we consider when we work with startup or with companies who want to launch platforms. So being on a B2C space or being on a B2B space, basically, where we work with a lot of industry verticals, because industries have seen success in B2C. Now, there is a time which has to be replicated in B2B. So that is where we work with a lot of manufacturing houses and see how this kind of be taken to the next level. So with this, I would like to end my presentation here.
Thank you so much, Purshottam, for your insights. Now, I think the common learning which we got from both the sessions is that not a single player can meet all security demands, right? So all the more reason for all of us to come together, collaborate, and support each other in this journey. So for the next keynote, I would like to call upon Mr. Akhilesh Tuteja, Global Cybersecurity Practice Co-Leader and Head Risk Consulting and Partner, KPMG India. And he would share his thoughts on the topic, Future of Cybersecurity.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay, that at least shows that I'm not talking to a video wall and there's a live audience here. Okay, I'm back again, second time in a day. Sounds like a boring subject to talk about. I'm really grateful to those 4 people who clapped, because that at least gave me an idea that there's an interest in the subject that I'm talking about. I chose to talk about the future of cybersecurity because I do believe that every one of us is really in a good shape with respect to what's happening today. I also know that most of us have an idea and a sense of what the future may look like, but at best, we are all wrong. Because future is, in my view, something which is certainly not what we believe it will be, because it will be very different. If you go back into your past and say, 20 years ago, if you were asked to say how the world will look like 20 years from now, it is going to be quite different than what you imagine it to be today. So the risk of predicting the future is always that you can at best be wrong. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, but I'll try and give you a glimpse of what we have seen the world of cybersecurity so far and how it's changed. So if there's any view and any expectation for us to see how it could look like. Why I decided to talk about the future as a subject, because not only you all know what's happening today, but I think it's also very important for us to prepare for what's going to come, because I'm deeply impressed with some of the conversations that happened this morning, especially the stuff which the panel discussion talked about on how the world is moving to cloud. And I was kind of sitting there and smiling because I remember exactly 10 years ago, and I'm lucky to be associated with Dsci for 10 years or more. In fact, I don't know where is Vinayak. I predate him for sure in Dsci. I'm one of the founding members. So 10 years ago exactly we were talking about, and one of these sessions I remember very clearly was cloud is bad because that's got the most security challenges. In this platform, in this city 10 years ago we were saying cloud is a bad idea, and the biggest reason cloud is a bad idea is because it's insecure. And now we've turned around 10 years later and says cloud is required because you want to be secure. So something which was considered to be the biggest threat has become the biggest enabler, so the world comes around. So if you're hearing something which says it's a bad, don't assume it's going to be bad because there's a silver lining in something which I want to talk about. All right, let me first start about this story. This is the story of my friend Don, who lives in Scotland. And Don decided to upgrade himself one day after he realized that this refrigerator of his, actually it wasn't that bad. This is a worse picture of the refrigerator. He actually had a refrigerator which he decided to upgrade and says, I'm bored with this refrigerator. And he buys a new refrigerator. And while the old one is still working, he doesn't know what to do. So he puts it in his front yard and puts a small label on it, says, free refrigerator for a good home. And the refrigerator is sitting there next day, the third day, a week has gone, and the refrigerator is still sticking there and getting worse. So he changes his plan. Next day he puts a different sticky, he says, a refrigerator for sale, 50 pounds. Next day morning it's stolen. So the point I'm trying to make is that if there is anything in life which people perceive value, it will be stolen. So if you work for companies which have no value, I think life is great, because you don't have a job to do then, you don't have to protect anything. But if you believe that there is an iota of a chance that the company you're working for has something valuable beyond your brain, by the way, then you got to worry, because they will be a target. So the world is all full of people who say that the bigger the value, the bigger the target you are, and therefore, if there's one advice I can give you, is work for a less valuable company. Of course, you'll get paid less, but you'll have less stress to deal with because they're going to be targeted less. But if you, of course, are ambitious and want to be looking into new areas, think of a places where the value is important. All right. How many of you have heard this phrase called the good old days? All right. Has anybody heard of a phrase called good new days? Naye din aayenge. Achhe din aayenge. That's futuristic, okay? But nobody is saying new good days. Everybody says good old days. And it's been a thing. How many of you have heard this from parents, your parents, saying, in my time? Yeah. And if you felt that that was, arey yaar, you will live the same thing 15 years from now, when your kids will get frustrated when you tell them that in my good time. So the world, how many of you have remembered the principle of entropy? Physics ki class mein gaye honge sab. Sorry, I can't speak Hindi here, it's Bangalore, but I'll try. Entropy. So the principle of entropy says that the world moves from order to chaos if nothing changes. So the chaos, disorder, will continue to increase in a system over time. So things keep getting worse. And that's how we keep referring to saying good old days. So everything which happened yesterday was better than what's going to happen. Anybody who's dealing with young kids, 2-year-old, 1-year-old kids? Some of you. And do you feel that yesterday was better than today? Yesterday was better than today? Yes. So tomorrow is always worse. when you're dealing with kids, when you're dealing with somebody, when you're dealing with your work, and when you're dealing with security. So the first principle, we are talking about future, it is certainly not going to be what Mr. Modi or whoever is kind of tell you in the world of cybersecurity, I can say. Maybe kahin aur achhe din aayenge, but yahan pe nahi aayenge shayad. So the first principle I'm saying that the good old days is not just a saying, it's actually a reality. But I'll come back to this, hold this thought. The good old days taught us the classical model, saying, let's do something which works in a classical world. And I'll give you a couple of examples of some of you I can see have gray hair like me, which come from the classical world, is these were the three principles most people relied on in the world of cybersecurity. The first one was one size fits all. So whether it is Infosys, whether it is Mindtree, whether it's Palo Alto, whether it's KPMG, whether, security is same for everybody. You apply the similar principles. So, you don't change the principle fundamentally. Everybody. So, you need to have a great antivirus, a malware, a firewall, and all of that. So, one size fits all. The second approach of classical world says that if you really want to protect something, do more than what's needed. So, if you need a protection of this level, ek aur laga do. Chhate ke upar chhata. And then buy an insurance. So that's how we said, okay, if the client is saying, because some of you, I read the pie chart which Rama presented, have to deal with external clients. So if the client is saying, I want X, put 2X, ek fail hoga to dusra chalega, right? So, do more so that at least something is safe and your job is safe for sure. And the third one was, prevention is better than detection or reaction or correction. So if you actually looked at it, and I want you to do this thought experiment in your mind, look at the amount of money you spend on cybersecurity in your company. What percentage of that money goes in preventing bad things from happening compared to dealing when bad things happen? Our studies indicate that it's about 85%. 85% of the organization's time, money, resources is spent on preventing things from going wrong, and only 15% is spent on detecting things or correcting things when they go wrong. So we believe in God saying, Puja kar liya, prasad mil gaya, life is good. So those are the three classical model strategies which we relied on in the good old days. Now let's look at it. In today's time, and if you have not heard it since morning, I can tell you at the risk of repetition, you can't prevent all bad things from happening. Vishal talked about the asymmetric warfare where while he has to deal with 1,000 fixes and the hacker has to find only one bad hole. So it is going to be impossible for us to prevent all bad things from happening, and therefore this strategy of an extreme reliance on prevention being more important than detection isn't going to work or isn't going to be effective as much. The second problem is with that one size fits all was a great thing in the good old days when you had few things to deal with. And in today's time, data is our biggest enemy when it comes to one size fits all or do more than what is needed. And why? Because if you look at it, the cost per TB of data is coming down dramatically. How many of you today have more storage on your phone than you had on your first laptop or desktop computer, right? Most of you. I'm a little bit bigger good old days. The first hard disk I worked on was 4 MB. And today you have 1,000 times the RAM on your phone today. So the cost of storage is going down, and when the cost of storage goes down, you go away from the quota limits. I have lived in a world where if you had email box size more than 5 MB, it was a crime. And today you got unlimited mailboxes. So the data is growing because it's cheap. And this is one area where making it cheaper is making it worse and certainly more expensive. So the ability to retrieve, ability to extract is far more difficult than just the ability to store. And the same goes for cost per GB of download, thanks to the 3-letter company, telecom company, which has changed the game, saying, you could download as much as you wanted as long as you give me some $6 a month, kind of a thing. So the cost of storage going down, the cost of transmission going down, effectively what it means that one WhatsApp message, which could be an image of 100 KB, now actually sits on 400 phones because it doesn't cost to forward it. So the cost of data when it increases, the cost of storage when it goes down, the ability to protect, and then the principle saying I'll protect everything with the same lever isn't going to work. Now let's look at what's been the changing security model over time. So the first, of course, was the old model of perimeter security. Basically, I shut my doors. As long as I got shut my doors, nobody can come into my house, so network protection was a great thing. Of course, we all know it's useless. Then came the defense in depth, which is endpoint protection, protection of users, identity access management, and all of that, saying, as long as I can have defense in depth, life is good. I'm not locking one door, I'm also locking my bathroom, and I'm also locking my flush, and I'm doing all of these things, and I'm also monitoring who's flushing. Now that also became less relevant as the threat became more advanced. So we came up with saying, okay, advanced persistent threat, which is saying not just in storage, data in motion, looking at data in sync, looking at all kinds of things where I'm trying to protect everything, every single asset which I consider interesting. Now all of that gave us a good gradual thing, but now it started to break down because the data volume is growing so much, the user are becoming less human, their devices and all of that. So effectively, hopefully, we will now live in a world of what the data-centric security, which means that you don't have to secure the endpoints, you got to secure data, and not all data, data in context. So that's kind of the fourth model, and I will spend a little bit of time on why, again, because we said that the classical model data is enemy because more data, cheaper data, more easy to transmit. So effectively, in the new world of data-centric security, two principles have to apply. Number one, that you need to understand where the sensitive data lie, because the one-size-fits-all protecting everything isn't going to work, because now you got not megabytes or gigabytes of data, you've got terabytes and petabytes of data. So that's figuring out what to protect, when to protect is more important than ever. Classifying data becomes more important. Now, of course, anybody in this room who says that they've figured out a method of how to classify data, I'll come and work for you. Because there's nobody who's yet figured out the perfect method of classifying data, even though a lot of certification standards you got in your pockets tell you that you classified your data, but you know really in your heart that you haven't classified them the way you should have. And the third one is that you monitor and control the misuse of data. Now those are the three things. So effectively I'm saying that we got to move to the data-centric security world, but I still don't know how we'll get there because we don't know how to classify data. And this is where I come saying that the more data is not always the bad thing. It was a bad thing for protection, but it's also a good thing on how to protect. And we heard another speaker in the morning talking about machine learning, talking about advanced AI and some of those things. So effectively, we are seeing that with the advent of ML, you are having the more data yet again as a boon. So as I said, cloud was a bad thing and cloud became a good thing. More data was a bad thing and more data can become a good thing, provided you know how to harness that data. So there are some of these algorithms which I've talked about. In the interest of time, I'm not going to talk, but I want to pick up one or two, which are very. So data classification is likely to become easier in the future than it's ever been in the past. Because the past classical method was user-based, manual, label-based. Now it's all about automated, and hopefully you'll get that to a better future. There are two methods in the AI/ML space, which is the supervised learning and the unsupervised learning, and there are good security approaches. I think Vishal touched upon this. I'm not going to talk about it in detail, but the data-centric model talks about that we invest in some of these technologies. What it means is that if you go in for the unsupervised learning, which most people find it easier because that's an easier way to kind of go there and there are better neural networks to deal with it, you got to have data which is clean. You got to have data which is reliable, and that's another big threat. So again, going back to the good old days, more data might still be okay, but clean data is more important. Now that is what I would say we've got to from where the past was, how it started to look bad, how we can make it look so shiny, and where we got to. In the interest of time, I'm going to run to my third segment, which is, can we look at the really distant future? So if you were to ask me a question saying, Akhilesh, you talk about cybersecurity to so many people, this is all look good. We all know we are getting there, and hopefully we'll have the auto classification methods which will deal with it. But what's really going to happen long time in future? And I want to just paint a little bit of picture for some of you who may have heard of it, who may have not really heard of some of these things. And I'm going to talk to you about, I talked about the storage model. So the storage model says that the cost of storage comes down by half every 2 years. That's the kind of the reverse of Moore's law which we have. So this is Moore's law, right? I'm sure all of you in this room have heard some day or the other about Moore's law. So the Moore's law came in 30 years or more than 30 years into existence, and people felt that it will survive 20 years. It survived almost 35 years. It says that the cost of, or the power of computing doubles every 18 months. And it's been happening all along. But now if you look at it, actually, and this is a little bit of interesting subject, I don't have time, but I'll very briefly touch upon. Actually, Moore's law stopped working long time ago. We all believe that computing power still doubles every 18 months and the Moore's law is still active, but it's actually not. It's a modified version of Moore's law, because effectively the ability to put more transistor on the square inch of a chip has got to an atomic level. And once you get to an atomic level, it's got to a subatomic level also. It's got to a level of thing where it's hard to put more transistor on the chip. So what we started doing is that we started to layer the chips. So we got one layer, another layer, and we started to do multi-threading and multi-core. So effectively, we are putting more cores rather than changing the process speed. So Moore's law came into a kind of a thing, but it's still growing. But still, there is a limit to which Moore's law will go. If you look at it, the entire world of cybersecurity hinges on the principles of encryption. So if you see any security technology, starting from your net banking when you do SSL encryption, or blockchain, or everything, relies on the fundamental principle saying what I know, only I know, what you know is in my public key and all of that. So effectively, the principle worked on saying that if I use the encryption, and as long as that encryption key cannot be broken, life is good. So Moore's law says that if today I can break a 40-bit encryption key, for me to break a 41-bit encryption key, I will take 18 more months. For me to break 42-bit, I will take 36 more months. So effectively, if I move from 40-bit, which we all started when I started working, to 56-bit, to 128, to now we are living with 256-bit, life is good. So effectively, in today's time, a 40-bit can be broken in few seconds, but a 256-bit key today cannot be broken because the computers will take that many more 1,000 years to get there. And that's why we call it safe encryption. So this is a safe encryption because computers will take several hundred years to break this kind of a key. But now, look at it a little bit of what I call the advent of not supercomputers, but the advent of quantum processor. Quantum computing is a breakthrough. It is a way different. I would love to talk to you about how quantum computing works, how it is fundamentally different from the logic gates, how it's fundamentally different from the fabric of the silicon and the transistor we're talking about, because it's a completely different way. It's no more zeros and ones. It's zeros and one and everything in between. So the classical computer can have only two states, 0 or 1. It can have unlimited state. The Schrodinger's law of whether the cat is alive or dead, it all applies in the form of quantum computing. There have been research in quantum computing for the last 25 years. We still don't have a commercially available user-centric quantum computers. We've got an IBM quantum computer, we've got a D-Wave, we've got a Google, all experimental quantum computers. But let's assume if I could have a quantum computer in my possession, how long will it take for me to break a 256-bit encryption? If I get a decent, not a high-end, a decent quantum computer today, you can break 256 encryption key in no time. The point I'm trying to make is that all these encryption keys are built as safe keys, assuming that the world lives on transistor and Moore's law and progresses. The moment quantum computer becomes practical, which is almost going to become in some time, all the security which we built in this world will go away like this. A blockchain, which we consider immutable today, also works on the principle of encryption, 256-bit. So if you had quantum computer in your hand, which I'm sure someday you will have, all of that goes away. So the encryption which we are building today is going to be extremely childish and insecure if we deal with the quantum computers. And how far we are? Maybe 10 years, maybe 5, maybe 20, I don't know, but we are there. So that's the point I'm trying to make, is that we are likely to be doomed if we do nothing about it. So we need to start thinking, saying, how do we build security systems which are not fundamentally dependent on the current technology and encryption safe system? And hopefully, my answer is that, so if you look at it in the classical world, encryption was easy, decryption was hard, but quantum computers are actually built for the single purpose and many times for doing what is called the integer factoring. And something like this can be done in few seconds rather than taking few years. So effectively, in the interest of time, I will come to saying that we are certainly not prepared for a quantum world to live with the cybersecurity. And our entire fabric of cybersecurity can go for a toss if we don't deal with it. My simple message, don't panic. You have to do plan. And if you have to look at your cybersecurity career 10 years from now, you got to deal with quantum, the way we dealt with cloud for the cloud. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Akhilesh, for taking us through this evolution of cybersecurity and what we have in future for us. Now, a lot has been said about industry development since morning, about our vision of achieving the $35 billion industry by 2025. So now for the last session before lunch, I would like to call upon Ms. Priya Madhavan, who has recently joined us as Director Industry Development, to throw some lights on the efforts taken by Dsci in cybersecurity industry development and its future course. Priya.
Overview of what this industry development team is, which is part of NASSCOM Dsci. So this is an occasion we are taking to give you an overview of this. So let's get started. Thanks for that. Let's start with the background of why this team was actually formed. In 2014, we had our Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji actually addressing the NASSCOM's 25th anniversary function. And that's when he said, India is really very good in software and software services. Why don't we make India a leader for security, be it security services or security product? So that was the challenge that our Prime Minister gave to the NASSCOM team. So NASSCOM team and Dsci actually set up a task force. And this was headed by a person, Rajendra S. Pawar. I'm sure most of you know him. He is the chairman and founder of NIIT. So this team, actually CSTF team, Cybersecurity Task Force team, actually came up with how we can make India a global leader in security by 2025. So that's the whole background about how this group was formed. So we heard Moore's fifth dimensions, and we all understand that cybersecurity is the fifth domain for any nation's security. And keeping the cyber space safe is as important as keeping the nation's frontier as well as the trade connection. So if we have the cyber environment safe, then I think we should be well equipped. It will be a very strategic difference for a country to be able to equip to be fighting in the cyber war zone scenario that we are in. With that importance on cybersecurity, there was a group of eminent, distinguished people from various fields, from academy, from government, from industry, who sat together and said how we could make India a global hub. And that's how you have the current status, where there are about 100 startup companies today in India who are working on cybersecurity. There are about 150 cybersecurity professionals, and the revenue is about 4.5 billion. And you'd be surprised that India itself has, the revenue worth of, it consumes a revenue worth of 1.6 billion worth of money is spent on cybersecurity services and products. So that's a huge market. But what is it that you all have to see is the spend on cybersecurity is about 2 to 4%. That's the revenue part of cybersecurity. And the goal that you see that we have to become, India has to become a $35 billion economy in cybersecurity is actually making sure that we move from 2 to 4% to 7 to 8%. And this is possible. There's more than enough demand to make that happen. And again, a very ambitious target of having about 1,000 startups working on security by 2025 and have, I think, skilled resources. All of us keep talking about it. And I think KPMG also was mentioning it's so important. People are coming to India, it's not just for cost, but of course there is talent. And the focus is to grow this talent multifold. So make it from 150K today to about 1 million security professionals. All this, if you look at numbers, it's like growing at 30% year on year to achieve this target by 2025. So how is the plan to go about doing this? We call it the triple helix model. We have the industry, we have the government, we have the academia. So what does the industry do? Industry actually identifies the white spaces, and these are areas of innovations where we could come up with products and services, grow the market, look at the new markets that we have already not penetrated in, and also develop a strong domestic market to consume the security services. With the government, come up with policies that will help in cybersecurity growth and build the brand India, and also ensure that we work with academy to build the skilled resources. With the academia, there's a lot of initiatives that Government of India has undertaken. There are courses that are available today at undergrad, postgrad, PhD levels to focus on cybersecurity. So what is the plan that the industry development team has for the various industries here? For the cybersecurity product company, the focus is R&D. How can we help them in R&D? How could we help them in incubation? How can we help them in mentorship? That is the focus that Dsci team will be working with the cybersecurity product company. What is it that we will bring for IT services company? We will probably help them do IP-led services. They can work with some startup company, or they can have their own IP, and that is the difference that we would like to bring in there. GIC is moving security operations. So what we see is GIs, I'm sure there'll be more in the KPMG discussion. It is not just security operations that the GICs would like to do. They would like to move up the value chain, give higher level services from India. Make security in India. This, I think, is so important, like everything make in India. Have security also as a big focus area, and have government policies to enable this happen. Technology MNCs are moving their operations to India because of our capabilities in terms of delivery and skills. Help the niche security services company to have IP-led services. And we also want to help the user organization, which could be the sectors, the government sectors, or the private or the public government, and make a difference in their cybersecurity journey. So these are a few things that I would like to talk about as what the Dsci industry development team has done so far. We actually are helping with the cybersecurity startup. So when it started, it was 80, now it's like 100 plus. We enable the VC investments to do the cybersecurity startup. There's quite a few products which have started up, have already been acquired. There's one of the product which has actually been public listed. Quick Heal is a product that has been publicly listed. We help with the R&D investments. So there are R&D investments happening in terms of Qualys, Gurukul, Securonics. These are having their R&D centers in India. SOC are growing for Accenture, Dell, Cisco. We are working with the banking verticals, and we're trying to build a cybersecurity framework for them. And there are quite a few system integrators who are looking at having cybersecurity as a specialized, as a growth offering for their particular industry. We are also we are also seeing that there are a lot of product security work happening. ABB is doing a lot of product security work. Philips is another company which is doing product security work. SMB awareness. So Dsci in combination with Google and Lockheed Martin are doing quite a bit of initiative to increase awareness of cybersecurity within the small and medium scale business. So with Google, I think there was workshops conducted in over 8 cities, Coimbatore, Surat, Vadodara, to name a few. So there was workshop conducted by Google along with Dsci, and then to increase awareness. Similarly, with Lockheed Martin, there's a lot of work that has been done in terms of creating materials. Cybersecurity training materials are available so that it could be consumed by the audience and then increase the awareness of what cybersecurity is all about. This is a very busy slide, but what I would like you to take away is there has been startups in most of the areas of security that we are aware of, be it network security, be it identity access management, data, cloud, application and endpoint security. What I would like to tell you is there are still a lot of open space. There are still not too many companies in forensics. So there's space in forensics that we could, startups can look at. There are places in security intelligence startups could look at. Cloud, we just see cloud access security, but there are so many things that we could do in cloud in terms of monitoring itself could be a big area. So there are still a lot of white spaces from the technology point of view for startups to make a big difference. What is it that we've been doing with the government? Dsci has been working with the government to come up with a framework for smart cities. There are already about 23 cities in India who have already started on Smart City initiative. There are about 17 of them which is work in progress. What is the Smart City all about? The Smart City program is actually an initiative by the city to actually have public Wi-Fi hotspots available, to have sensors for parking, sensors for lighting, sensors for climatic conditions in terms of giving alerts for flood alerts kind of a thing. So these are some, having a command and control center. So these are some of the initiatives that cities are adopting, and they are probably not rolling out all of the initiatives of smart cities at one shot, but they are rolling out in patches. We've worked with 3 state governments to help them define the cybersecurity policy. As Rama was mentioning in the morning, the recent one was where Dsci team worked with the Telangana government to set up the cybersecurity policy for Telangana. We've been working with regulatory guidelines with RBI on digital payments. As part of the CSTF initiative, one of the very important things was any organization which is making a turnover of over 1,000 crores annually should mention about their cybersecurity activities in their annual report. That's the mandate that's been made. Anybody working in critical infrastructure should also mention about the cybersecurity activities that they are taking in. And also one good news is there is a need for all of these big organizations to have a qualified CISO appointed. So a good job opportunity for many of you. MITI has also mentioned that 10% of IT budget has to go into cybersecurity. So again, there'll be quite a bit of initiatives the organizations would take to make their offerings safe. Commercialization is TDB is Technology Development Board. It's an organization with DST. This is a very important offering which Dsci has worked along with TDB to get funding for cybersecurity products. And this proposal has been rolled out, and today we have about 20 proposals with TDB which are being evaluated, and once they are selected, they would get the funding from the TDB to progress to the next level. And finally, there is this grand challenge which MITI will be announcing soon. So this will be an arena which will actually enable a lot of entrepreneurs and innovators to take part in this and see how they could get you get reputation, you get prize money. So how you could use this to make more innovations happen out of India. So these are some. I'll be talking about few focus groups that we have in the industry development team. So one is the domestic market development. So we see a huge space in domestic market development. We would like to help organizations move into the secure, have a safe, secure transition into the $3 billion digitized economy. Clusters, or SIZ, which is called Special Innovation Zone. This is a very important initiative. This is actually taken on from what few of the very advanced countries in cybersecurity are doing. So I'm sure most of you all have heard about Hague Cybersecurity Center. There are Israel, of course, all of us know. There's these type of clusters set up in UK and America, where the focus is to create an environment where you're going to have a product company, you're going to probably have services company, you would have investors, everybody there, and they come up with innovations. For Hague, I think they look at both products and services, whereas America, what is there, they probably only are looking at skilled resources, but India, we, from our cluster perspective, are looking at it at the broad range. We will look at services, product companies being encouraged as part of the clusters. Use case clearinghouse is again a very, very important concept. The driving principle of use case is to identify white spaces, have a challenge to create those use cases, and then finally develop that into a product. It's a very clearly laid out 4-step process. It's identify, then you have a problem statement, you have a validate statement, and you have a fabricate level. When it comes to the fabricate level, it's actually going to be industrialized. Whatever use case that you have identified in the white space actually becomes a viable product. This is a very, very key initiative. And we had a first use case workshop. The focus area was privacy. And we will have many, many more of this. So this is going to be a continuous channel of ideas that's going to be flowing in, which will continuously get into the evaluation phase, then an MVP phase, and then finally into a fabrication phase. Export market, we see there's a lot of demand in US, Middle East, Australia, so we would be very actively looking at how we can expand in these market space. Policy engagement and research is a very key activity, so we are working with the government and the regulators to see how cybersecurity growth policies can be implemented. And we are also trying to have the user group actually understand, create awareness within the user group and what the policy is all about. Skills development, can't stress more. So lot of initiatives in terms of having skills development and how to increase this on scale. Research and monitoring and branding. Research, one of the reports that you saw was the report that we spoke about in the morning about KPMG. So there will be more such reports that will be coming out, which will give you an idea of what the future of cybersecurity looks like, how should we go about, what should anybody do there, kind of a thing. It will be forward-looking. And branding, it's so important to bring the India advantage pitch. Because the whole thing we are doing is to make India a global hub for cybersecurity. So branding becomes a very key initiative. So the call of the hour is we would like everybody to get involved in this very interesting, tough journey to make India a global hub for security. So we would like you to give attention to technology. We would like to co-create security solutions. We would like you all to incubate cybersecurity startups, bring security in discussion with digitization and innovation, make the industry with more skilled resources, and essentially, deliberate on use cases which is across the industry. Like anybody from the industry could actually work come up with the use cases, and the use case is viable, make it into a product. So we would actually urge everybody in the ecosystem, be it the industry, be it the government, be it the academia, startups, work together to make India a global hub for cybersecurity. So we would like you all to be part of this journey. You could, I'm sure you would have seen the banner where you have the QR code, so you could register there for more information, and you could also send us an email on this ID. So thank you so much for this.